Built on an island 13 kilometers long, surrounded by water on every side. A city nobody could control, nobody could predict, and nobody has ever been able to stop. Fire, war, occupation, riots, bankruptcy, terror. Every generation, something tried to finish this city. None of it worked. Now, using advanced AI to reconstruct centuries of paintings and photographs, we can watch exactly how it happened. This is the entire history of New York City. Now let's go back to where it all began. Before there was a city, there was an island. Dense forest from shore to shore, wetlands, hills, rivers on either side. When the Italian explorer Giovanni da Verrazzano sailed into the harbour in 1524, the first European ever to see it, he wrote to the King of France, "A very agreeable sight between two small hills, between them a very great river flowing out to sea." The Lenape people had called this place home for at least 13,000 years. They knew every current in the harbour, every ridge in the bedrock. Broadway, the great artery that still cuts diagonally through Manhattan today, defying the perfect grid built around it, was a Lenape trail. The name Manhattan comes from them too, Mannahatta, most likely meaning island of many hills. Then, in September 1609, a ship appeared at the mouth of the harbour, the Half Main, the Half Moon. Her captain was an Englishman named Henry Hudson, sailing for the Dutch East India Company, looking for a passage to Asia. His first mate wrote in his journal of "a very good land to fall with and a pleasant land to see." Hudson turned back. Within 15 years, the Dutch would return. The world the Lenape had known for 13,000 years was about to end. The Dutch didn't come to build a city, they came to get rich and leave. The thing that brought them was a hat. Across Europe, the fashion for broad-brimmed hats made from felted beaver fur had become an obsession. Waterproof, durable, expensive enough to signal wealth. European beavers were nearly extinct, but Hudson's reports described a river valley teeming with them. Within 2 years of his voyage, Dutch trading ships were already making the crossing. By 1624, they had a permanent settlement at the southern tip of Manhattan, Fort Amsterdam. A handful of wooden buildings. The first settlers weren't even Dutch. They were 30 Walloon families, French-speaking Protestant refugees who'd fled religious persecution. They arrived, looked at the island, and got to work. In 1626, the company's director, Peter Minuit, formalized the Dutch claim. He negotiated a purchase for goods valued at 60 guilders, axes, kettles, hoes, drilling awls. The only evidence it happened is a single letter, written by a Dutch official named Peter Schagen back to Amsterdam. They have purchased the island of Manhattan from the savages for the value of 60 guilders, he wrote. That letter still exists. There was one problem nobody mentioned at the time. The tribe Minuit dealt with, most likely the Canarsie, were based across the water in what is now Brooklyn. The Lenape who actually lived on Manhattan had agreed to nothing. The Dutch had bought the island from people who didn't own it. The Lenape didn't see land as something that could be permanently sold, only shared. Both sides went home believing they'd got the better deal. Only one of them was right. New Amsterdam grew, chaotically, improbably. By 1643, barely 500 people, a visiting Jesuit priest reported 18 languages being spoken within its walls. The city was never more than half Dutch, even in name. It had 17 taverns and 1 church. Within a year of the settlement's founding, the first enslaved Africans had arrived. Brought over by the Dutch West India Company to clear land, build roads, and raise the fort. The real trading happened 150 miles upriver, at Fort Orange, present-day Albany, where the Mohawk brought pelts down from the interior. Manhattan was where the ships loaded. Over 50,000 pelts in 7 years, all flowing through this small, muddy settlement at the tip of the island, bound for Amsterdam. And the Lenape were being pushed further from the land they had lived on for 13,000 years. What both sides had understood differently in 1626 was now being settled the only way it ever seems to get settled, with fire. What followed was 2 years of war across the entire region. Raids, ambushes, villages burned, farms destroyed. All of it ordered by one man sitting inside the fort, while the colony fell apart around him. 1,600 Lenape and allied people died. Hundreds of settlers fled back to Europe. New Amsterdam nearly ceased to exist. New Amsterdam had spent 20 years becoming the most chaotic, ungovernable, gloriously unruly settlement in the New World. Now it was about to meet the one man determined to change that. He had a wooden leg, an iron temper, and the full authority of the Dutch West India Company behind him. His name was Peter Stuyvesant. He arrived in May 1647 to a colony still smouldering from Kieft's war. Broken buildings, empty farms, a fort falling apart. His first words to the people were,
"I shall govern you as a father his children!"
The city was not impressed. But over the next 17 years, Peter Stuyvesant, Old Silverleg, the man who'd lost his leg to a cannonball and replaced it with one wrapped in silver bands, built something remarkable. The wall along the settlement's northern edge that gave Wall Street its name. Broadway, properly laid out. The canal that became Broad Street. A weekly market, paved streets. Fire regulations. The first municipal government. He expanded the city northward and turned what had been a muddy, chaotic trading post into a real colonial capital. He was also a tyrant. He tried to ban anyone who wasn't Dutch reformed. Jews, Quakers, Lutherans, from worshipping freely. His own colonists pushed back hard enough that the company in Amsterdam repeatedly overruled him. In 1657, 30 residents of Flushing sent him a petition defending religious freedom for all people, a document historians now call a direct ancestor of the First Amendment. Stuyvesant arrested the signers. Then came August 1664. England wanted the harbour. England wanted the trade. And England's King Charles II had already promised the entire colony to his brother, the Duke of York, as a gift. 4 warships sailed in and delivered a surrender letter to Stuyvesant, offering generous terms. Keep your property, your laws, your freedoms. Stuyvesant tore it to pieces. But the city had already read it. 93 burghers told him to accept. The fort had barely enough gunpowder to last an hour. The crowd forced him to tape the letter back together and read it aloud. Not a shot was fired. The Dutch marched to their ships. The English walked in, and almost nothing changed. The streets kept their Dutch names. The merchants kept their businesses. The pubs stayed open. 9 years later, the Dutch sailed back in and took it again, renaming it New Orange. They held it for 14 months before handing it back to the English in a peace treaty. Trading the greatest harbour in the New World for a small island in Indonesia they thought was worth more. It was not. But one thing had changed immediately after that first English takeover. Under the Dutch, slavery had existed in a legal grey zone, loosely regulated, with paths to freedom still open. Under the English, it became law. Hard, codified, permanent. Children born to enslaved mothers were enslaved for life. Families could be separated and sold. The city that had once spoken 18 languages and sheltered anyone useful was now building its prosperity on something else entirely. By 1703, 40% of New York households owned enslaved people, the highest proportion of any city in the American North. In 1711, a slave market opened at the foot of Wall Street, where human beings were now bought and sold in the open air. Then came April 1712. 23 enslaved people gathered at midnight on Maiden Lane, set fire to a building, and attacked the whites who came to put it out. 9 were killed. The executions that followed were designed to send a message. People burned alive, crushed on a wheel, starved in chains. The city passed even harsher laws and tried to forget what had happened. Then, in 1733, a German immigrant printer named John Peter Zenger published a newspaper attacking the governor. Arrested for libel. His lawyer argued truth was a defense. The jury acquitted him. Founding Father Gouverneur Morris, the man who later wrote the preamble to the United States Constitution, called it the germ of American freedom, the morning star of that liberty which subsequently revolutionized America. It is still taught in law schools today as the founding case for freedom of the press in America. Between the rebellions, New York quietly became something remarkable. The Stadthaus, the old Dutch city hall on Pearl Street, still dominated the waterfront, its stepped gables rising above the harbour where trading vessels loaded and unloaded around the clock. Dutch gables gave way to Georgian townhouses block by block. Church spires rose above the roofline. 10,000 people by the 1740s and growing fast. One of the busiest ports in the British Empire, its ships carrying furs, timber, grain and rum to London, the Caribbean and back again. A city getting rich and getting restless. And then Britain overreached. The Stamp Act of 1765 taxed everything printed in the colonies. Newspapers, legal documents, even playing cards. New York erupted. The Sons of Liberty formed, organized, and made their feelings known with a Liberty pole erected in the Common at the north end of Broadway, right in front of the British barracks. the soldiers chopped it down. The colonists put up a new one. The soldiers chopped that down too, then blew up the third with explosives. The colonists built a fourth, wrapped in iron. The soldiers destroyed that as well. On January 19, 1770, 6 weeks before the Boston Massacre, the back and forth exploded into a street battle at Golden Hill. Colonists armed with clubs and cutlasses, soldiers with bayonets, several people stabbed. The first blood of the revolution, spilled not in Boston, but in New York. By 1775, the city was bitterly divided, half loyalist, half patriot, and increasingly unable to tell the difference. The war that everyone could see coming was about to arrive, and New York, sitting at the mouth of the Hudson, controlling the harbor that controlled the continent, was going to be right at the center of it. Washington was already marching south. Washington arrived in April 1776 with 19,000 men and orders to hold the city at all costs. The British arrived in July, 400 ships anchoring off Staten Island, 32,000 soldiers, the largest expeditionary force Britain had ever sent anywhere in the world. For a few weeks, the two sides stared at each other across the harbour. In the meantime, news arrived from Philadelphia. On the evening of July 9th, Washington had the Declaration of Independence read aloud to his troops on the Common
We hold these truths to be
at the north end of Broadway.
all men are created equal.
A crowd marched to Bowling Green and tore down the gilded equestrian statue of King George III. They melted it down and cast it into 42,000 musket balls. The city that had spent a decade arguing about whether to fight had made its decision. 6 weeks later, the British attacked. On August 27, 1776, they swept around Washington's flank at Long Island, the largest single battle of the entire Revolutionary War, and crushed him completely. Washington stood on a hill and watched his army collapse.
Good God.
He said.
What brave fellows I must this day lose.
He was trapped. The British were on three sides. The East River was at his back. Howe assumed he had nowhere to go, so he halted the attack. He was wrong. On the night of August 29th, Washington ordered every boat that could be found. 9,000 men, with their horses, their cannons, their supplies, were rowed silently across the East River to Manhattan in complete darkness. Then a fog descended over Brooklyn, hiding the last boats until every man was safely across. Washington was the last man to leave. The British woke up to an empty camp. New York fell anyway. On September 15th, the British landed on Manhattan. Washington retreated north. And 6 days later, in the early hours of September 21st, fire broke out in Lower Manhattan. It burned through the night, a quarter of the city gone by morning. The British occupied New York for 7 years, the longest occupation of any American city in the entire war. Loyalists flooded in. Patriots fled. The streets Washington had trained his army on became a garrison town. And in the harbour, anchored just off the Brooklyn shore, the British moored their prison ships, rotting hulks crammed with captured American soldiers and sailors. 11,000 people died aboard those ships over the course of the war, more than in all the battles of the Revolution combined. The bodies washed up on the Brooklyn shore for years. The war ended in 1783. On November 25th, the British finally left. As a parting gesture, they greased the flagpole at Fort George, so the Americans couldn't raise their own flag. A soldier named John Van Arsdale nailed wooden cleats into the pole, climbed it, tore down the Union Jack, and ran up the stars and stripes. For 100 years, the city celebrated Evacuation Day as its greatest holiday. 5 years later, on April 30th, 1789, George Washington stood on the balcony of Federal Hall on Wall Street and took the oath of office
I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President
as the first President of the United States. New York was the first capital of the new nation. The Bill of Rights was proposed here. The first cabinet met here. Then, in 1790, the capital moved to Philadelphia. The war was over. The government was gone. The city was half burned. So how did it become the most important port on Earth in less than 30 years? Two things built modern New York: a plan drawn on paper and a ditch dug across a state. The plan came first. In 1811, 3 commissioners, one of them Gouverneur Morris, hired a 20-year-old surveyor named John Randall Jr. and sent him to walk the length of Manhattan. He spent years mapping every hill, every swamp, every farm and stream on the island. Then the commissioners took his maps and drew straight lines over all of it. 155 numbered streets, 12 avenues. A perfect grid imposed on the entire island, from Houston Street to 155th Street, most of which was still forest and farmland. The plan didn't describe a city that existed. It described a city they intended to build. The park-like grounds of the American Museum of Natural History, called Theodore Roosevelt Park, is the only one of the planned public spaces of the Commissioner's Plan which still exists. The ditch came in 1825. Governor DeWitt Clinton had spent a decade pushing a project his opponents called Clinton's Folly.
Nonsense! The economic boom will silence our critics.
A canal 363 miles long, connecting the Great Lakes to the Hudson River. When it opened, Clinton sailed from Buffalo to New York Harbor and poured a barrel of Lake Erie water into the Atlantic, the wedding of the waters. The canal cut the cost of shipping goods from the American interior by 90% overnight. Every bushel of wheat, every barrel of flour from the vast Midwest now flowed through New York. The city had always had the best harbor. Now it had a continent behind it. The canal needed financing, so New York built banks. The port grew, the merchants multiplied, and southern cotton planters started routing their money through New York too. By the 1840s, more money flowed through Lower Manhattan than anywhere else in America. Wall Street stopped being a street and started being a concept. The consequence was immediate. 60,000 people in 1800, 120,000 by 1820, 300,000 by 1840, 500,000 by 1850. New York quadrupled in a single generation. They came from everywhere. The Irish arrived in the greatest numbers, fleeing a famine that had killed 1 million people. They stepped off the ships sick, broke, and desperate. Germans followed, fleeing the failed revolutions of 1848. Free black Americans moved north. By 1850, nearly half of all New Yorkers were foreign-born. 5 Points, part of modern-day Chinatown, built on a filled-in swamp just north of City Hall, became the most notorious slum in the Western world. Charles Dickens visited in 1842 and described streets of poverty, wretchedness and vice, cholera, children dying in the streets. The poverty curdled into violence. On the 4th of July 1857, while the rest of the city celebrated Independence Day, the Irish Dead Rabbits stormed the Bowery Boys clubhouse. 2 days of street warfare followed. An estimated 1,000 men armed with bricks, clubs, and paving stones. 8 people were killed. The state militia had to march in to restore order. By 1850, New York was the largest city in the Western Hemisphere. 200 years ago, Fort Amsterdam stood on this exact ground, a wooden fort protecting fewer than 1,000 people. By 1850, that same patch of earth is the Custom House. It was also a city whose banks financed southern cotton plantations, whose economy was tangled with slavery in ways most New Yorkers preferred not to examine. They were about to be forced to. It didn't take long. On January 6, 1861, just months before the first shots of the Civil War, the mayor of New York City stood up in front of the Common Council and proposed that the city secede from the United States. His name was Fernando Wood. His argument was simple. New York's entire economy ran on southern cotton. 40% of everything shipped out of the port. The banks, the merchants, the counting houses, all of it tied to the slave states. Wood's solution was to make New York a free city, independent from both the Union and the state, so it could keep trading with whoever won. The Common Council approved the proposal, had copies printed and distributed. Within months, Fort Sumter was shelled and the war began. Overnight, backing secession stopped being a business decision and started being treason. The Common Council members who had approved Wood's proposal quietly reversed themselves. The alternative was the gallows. And New York's merchants discovered something useful. Financing a war was even more profitable than shipping cotton. The secession proposal vanished. Fernando Wood wrote to Lincoln personally, offering his military services. Lincoln ignored him. But the city's loyalties had been noted, and 2 years later, they would explode. In the summer of 1863, the federal government introduced a military draft with a provision. A man could avoid service by paying $300. For a working-class Irish immigrant earning less than that in a year, the message was clear. Rich men would stay home. Poor men would die. In a war that many of them blamed, rightly or wrongly, on the very existence of black Americans in the country. On July 13th, a mob, mostly Irish immigrant workers, stormed the draft office on 3rd Avenue and set it on fire. Then it exploded into something far worse. For 4 days, New York erupted in the worst urban violence in American history. Buildings burned, police were overwhelmed. 11 black men were lynched in the streets, hunted, not caught in crossfire. On 5th Avenue, between 43rd and 44th Streets, stood the Colored Orphan Asylum. 233 black children inside. A mob broke down the front door with an axe, ransacked every room, and burned it to the ground. The The children escaped minutes before. At least 119 people were killed. 3,000 black New Yorkers were left homeless. The troops that finally restored order had been rushed directly from Gettysburg. The war ended in 1865. New York emerged from it richer than it entered. War contracts, manufacturing, and finance had poured money into the city even as it burned itself from within. Central Park took shape. The first elevated railway clattered along Greenwich Street. The ambition of the city wouldn't wait for the wounds to heal. The war had made New York rich. Now it was going to get obscenely rich. The Gilded Age, mansions on Fifth Avenue, banquets where cigarettes were wrapped in $100 bills. And underneath all of it, Boss Tweed, the man who controlled every nomination, every contract, every city job, and stole between $25 million and $200 million doing it. The courthouse on Chamber Street was budgeted at $250,000. It ended up costing $13 million. The bill for brooms alone matched the original total budget. He was brought down by a cartoonist. He died in jail in 1878. While Tweed was stealing the city, someone else was building it something extraordinary. On May 24, 1883, the Brooklyn Bridge opened after 14 years of construction. Its designer died before it was finished. His son was bedridden by decompression sickness. His son's wife ended up running much of the construction herself and was the first person to cross the completed bridge. At least 27 workers died building it. P.T. Barnum eventually proved its strength by marching 21 elephants across it. Today, more than 140 years later, it still carries 100,000 people across the East River every single day, one of the most iconic landmarks New York has ever produced. Then the city started looking up. In 1902, the Flatiron Building rose at the corner of Fifth Avenue and Broadway, 22 floors of steel wedged into a triangular plot like the prow of a ship. Workers walked open iron beams hundreds of feet above the street with nothing beneath them but air. In 1886, the Statue of Liberty arrived, a gift from France, raised in the harbour of a city absorbing immigrants faster than it could house them. Then, in 1892, Ellis Island opened. Over the next 60 years, 12 million people passed through its registry hall. The city that had been built by immigrants was being rebuilt by them again. Many of those immigrants ended up in factories. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory on Washington Place employed hundreds of young women, mostly Italian and Jewish immigrants, some as young as 14. They worked up to 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, for a few dollars. The doors were locked from the outside during shifts to stop them taking breaks or stealing scraps of fabric. On March 25, 1911, a fire broke out on the 8th floor. No fire escapes, the locked doors. 146 people died, many jumping from the windows rather than burn, landing on the pavement while crowds watched from below. It was the deadliest industrial disaster in the history of New York City, and one of the deadliest in American history. The city kept moving. It always did. And the 20s were coming. And New York was about to lose its mind.
Read all about it!
The city had survived fire, war, riots, and corruption. But the 20s were coming. First, though, it went underground. On October 27, 1904, the New York City subway opened. 9 miles of track running from City Hall to 145th Street in Harlem. More than 100,000 people paid a nickel each to ride it on the first day. The mayor enjoyed himself so much, he refused to hand over the controls until 103rd Street. For the first time, a New Yorker could live far from where they worked. The city exploded northward overnight. And nowhere did it explode harder than Harlem. Black Americans had been fleeing the Jim Crow South for decades, arriving in New York with little and finding more than they expected. By the 1920s, Harlem had become something extraordinary. A neighborhood where Langston Hughes wrote poetry and jazz rhythms, where Duke Ellington packed out the Cotton Club every night, where Louis Armstrong made recordings that would change music forever. The greatest explosion of black art, literature, and music in American history happened in a few square miles of Upper Manhattan in a single decade. The Harlem Renaissance didn't just change New York, it changed America. Then came Prohibition. In 1920, the United States banned alcohol. New York essentially ignored it. At the height of Prohibition, there were over 30,000 speakeasies operating in the city, more bars than before the ban. The city that had spent 3 centuries refusing to follow rules added one more law to the pile it had no intention of obeying. The 20s roared, the stock market soared, the city felt invincible. On October 29, 1929, it wasn't. Black Tuesday. Over 16 million shares traded on the New York Stock Exchange in a single day. $14 billion wiped out in hours. Fortunes that had taken lifetimes to build were gone before the closing bell. Bread lines appeared on the same streets where Gilded Age banquets had been held 40 years before. The Great Depression settled over the city like a fog that wouldn't lift. And then, in the middle of all of it, New York did something extraordinary. Construction began on the Empire State Building on March 17, 1930, 5 months after the crash. At its peak, over 3,400 workers were on site daily, many of them Mohawk ironworkers who walked steel beams 1,000 feet in the air without flinching. It was completed in 410 days. The tallest building on Earth, built in just over a year, in the depths of the worst economic crisis in American history. For years, its owners left the lights on in empty offices just to make it look full. Nobody could afford to rent the space. They called it the Empty State Building. It stood empty for years. Then the war ended. And New York, as it always did, came back bigger than anyone expected. New York emerged from the war as the capital of the world. Not just America, the world. Writer E.B. White put it simply. New York was, by way of becoming the capital of the world, the UN headquarters on the East River, 40,000 factories, Wall Street, the undisputed center of global finance, the art world's center of gravity crossing the Atlantic, Pollock, de Kooning, Rothko, all working downtown. The city that started as a Dutch trading post for 1,000 people was now where the world came to talk. It couldn't last. Robert Moses never won a single election. He held 12 public positions simultaneously, appointed rather than elected, and reshaped the city for over 40 years. He built Jones Beach, the Triborough Bridge, the West Side Highway, hundreds of playgrounds and parks. New York's modern infrastructure is largely his. But Moses also tore the city apart. The Cross Bronx Expressway alone displaced nearly 4,000 families and carved a 7-mile gash through the Bronx. Across his career, he displaced an estimated 250,000 New Yorkers, disproportionately Black and Latino communities with little power to stop him. He once said he couldn't make an omelette without breaking eggs. The eggs never forgot. Manufacturing left. The middle class followed to the suburbs. By the late 1960s, landlords in the South Bronx were abandoning buildings, some burning them for insurance money. New York lost 500,000 jobs between 1969 and 1976, 800,000 fewer people by 1980. Then the city ran out of money. October 16, 1975. New York had $453 million in debt due. It had $34 million in the bank. Firehouses shuttered, garbage piled up. The city went to Washington and asked for help. President Ford said no. The Daily News front page read, "Ford to city, drop dead." But while the Bronx burned, something else was happening 2 miles away. On August 11, 1973, an 18-year-old named DJ Kool Herc threw a back-to-school party in the recreation room of his apartment building at 1520 Sedgwick Avenue. 2 turntables, drum breaks looped into something endless. That night is now recognized as the birth of hip-hop. From the most abandoned neighborhood in America came the most influential music of the 20th century. The 1980s brought crack cocaine and 2,262 murders in a single year. The city looked finished. The city clawed back. Crime peaked at 2,262 murders in 1990 and fell below 1,000 by 1996. Times Square transformed. Violent crime fell 56%. Dot-com money poured in. New York roared back harder than anyone expected. Then came September 11, 2001. 2 planes, 2 towers. Gone in under 2 hours. 2,977 people dead. Fire, war, riots, bankruptcy, terror. None of it was enough. New York doesn't survive in spite of its chaos. It survives because of it.